Wang Changling is roughly a generation older than some of the superstars of the Tang Dynasty. In terms of poetry, he is considered just a little bit lesser light. His poetry is well regarded and just more of a middle tier than the heights that others achieved. He is, however, remembered largely today and very well for his literary criticism. He offers a view of aesthetics that still exerts some influence today within the realm of literary studies. He he did die in the An Lushan Rebellion, so he never really got the opportunity to do a late in life type thing. He lived to be a decent age, but his work was actually developed and published and publicized more by a Japanese monk who had taken some of Changling's material out and collected it into an organized edition, largely to preserve not only it but a particular Buddhist interpretation of literature, the tradition of Chinese letters in Japan, and in particular the Buddhist strain of them. And as you read his theories, you can get an awful lot of that. The some of the same philosophy that undergirds the Buddhist belief system is clearly framing his reference for how to approach literature. He says, from ancient times, literature has arisen from non-action and started from nature, forming itself in response to stimulus without ornament or selection. We produce words to be fitting. When they fit their objects, then they are appropriate. Yeah, that is straight up Buddhism. But in terms of a working theory of literature, it can be a bit opaque. When they fit their object, then they are appropriate. The words fit their object, then they are appropriate. It's interesting in that one sentence, when they fit their objects, that's a completely subjective judgment, I would say. Then they are appropriate. It seems like a categorical statement of an objective truth. So there is that slight disconnect there. But impossible to pass by this without noticing that the emphasis on non-action, that Buddhist core that suggests that everything is best when passive, when not necessarily acted upon, without ornament or selection. So there's a real question of agency here. A real question of passivity that throughout his theory is kind of amorphous in its articulation. Writing is neither difficult nor toilsome. You tell that to writers, quite frankly. In writing, just have lots of ideas, letting the one penetrate the other until your mind is tired and your intelligence exhausted. You must forget yourself and be unrestrained. Well, telling a writer with writer's block that you should just have lots of ideas, that's not helpful. But the notion of penetration is curious because this word recurs. Now, again, translation, always an issue. But the notion of one idea penetrating the other until your mind is tired and your intelligence exhausted. Well, when your mind is tired and your intelligence exhausted, that gives a sense of the passivity that that non-action implies, that sense of just being open and having emptied yourself. But the penetration, that seems a bit more aggressive. I mean, is that not in some way a kind of ornament or selection, a kind of intentional action upon something? That's a curious Seeming conflict that I'm not sure how to resolve. You must forget yourself and be unrestrained. Well, clearly that's non-action again. You must forget yourself. You must divorce yourself from any sense of your own identity. You must become completely passive, a reed that bends rather than breaks. That is straight up Buddhism, but I'm not sure how it works in practice from literature. Now, when you have an idea for making a poem, you must concentrate your mind's eye and attack its object. When you attack it with your mind, then you deeply penetrate the world. Again, that word penetrate and the notion of attacking, this does not seem Buddhist. It seems, well, it seems like two opposites being coalesced into a whole, which is, that is, in a way, that is Buddhist thought, quite frankly. It is two opposing ideas encapsulating one another. It's the mandala. It is the yin and the yang. It is a number of different efforts for resolution of conflict and just accepting that the conflict is part of its holistic nature. Everyone who writes must always create ideas. Concentrate your mind beyond the sea of heaven. Let your imagination roam before the beginning of the world. Cleverly revolve words and phrases. Skillfully train your ideas and soul. In the words and lines you write, never use archaic language. Nowadays, people will forge words with old meanings, revise old language, move the head and change the tail. Such people will never advance far. That's because they have no character of their own. If you can't concentrate your mind, belaboring your mind for insight will not work. Again, an awful lot going on there. You must always create ideas. Yeah, kind of writing. Concentrate your mind beyond the sea of heaven. Let your imagination roam before the beginning of the world. That's very poetic. That gives a sense of, well, okay, you need to expand your mind, let's say. You need to open it up to vast sources. There is, again, a sense of penetration about explicitly going out, not being passive. If you are traveling to the end of time or the end of the world or something like that, you are certainly going out and not allowing it to come to you. So there is that duality going on there, or that reverse coming on there. But then cleverly revolve words and phrases, skillfully train your ideas and soul. That is action. That is not non-action. That is a deliberate and explicit and penetrative activity. Cleverly revolve words and phrases. How is that square with not using ornament or selection? You are actually wrestling with the way to express something in a very deliberate and active way. That's a seeming contradiction as far as I can tell, but it gives a sense of the kind of alchemical relationship of the writer to his material, where sometimes it is just engaging from one side of your mind to going to the other side, and practicing this kind of back and forth between the spiritual and the material, between the imagination and the empirical realm. Balancing these back and forth and embracing the idea of balance. This is very Buddhist. This is a sense of everything is going to be uh, conceivable within a broad enough scope if you just have the perspective to take it all in. All those who write poems copy out for themselves the good parts of poetic language from past to present in what are called pocket notebooks in order to ward off depression. When the impulse to write doesn't come, then you must glance through your pocket notebook to elicit the impulse. Well, that's just a poem in your pocket. That is keeping alive to language by, frankly, copying others. He is, if there is an ability to take inspiration from others, that is perhaps being receptive, that is perhaps being passive, that is in many ways then okay, that is Buddhist. He says, imitate old writings, but don't follow their old ideas, or you will never advance far. In all cases, you must crisscross and zigzag, transform and appropriate the material in 100 ways. At the head and in each section, you must let your idea lead the way, and then afterwards return and gather up the original idea. The that is various forms of taking inspiration, depending on how you want to view it. There is this conscious, I would say, throughout Wang Changling's writing, there is this conscious toggling back and forth between the idea of inspiration and execution, where he is constantly shifting modes between those two. He says just before that one paragraph, he says, if you see that your inspiration is flagging a little and your poem is yet unfinished, then wait until later for inspiration to finish it. You must not forcibly harm your spirit. That sentence, or that little paragraph, comes right before the previous paragraph we just spoke about, which seems to offer alternative advice. So he seems to be saying that in keeping to one way, one particular mode, is not necessarily productive. You have to go back and forth between the inspiration and the execution, between the spirit and the material, between penetrative and receptive. There is in this a kind of maddening confusion, but what about writing isn't maddening and confusing? What about writing isn't somehow conflicting in one way or the other? Poetry, especially, is difficult and very maddening to get a hold of. But you see him trying to go about it and trying to do it in a perhaps poetic way, where by offering seemingly conflicting advice, he is mirroring the conflicting impulses of poetic inspiration, which of course nobody really knows where it comes from or how to do it. It's just that if you do it enough, sooner or later you stumble on something. Maybe there are different techniques, maybe you can copy them. Probably you're going to have to be, if you are copying from someone, as he says, you're going to have to go back through and adapt it along the way. The efforts to come up with something original, come up with something worthwhile, is a matter of some persistence and some magic chemistry that perhaps we don't quite understand. And he is trying to demonstrate this in the writing. The writing that he's laying out is all like it is all within the Chinese and Japanese, to a degree, belief in all literature as being essentially didactic. It's supposed to teach you something. So he is here being very didactic, but going about it in a poetic way, demonstrating in the shifting modes of his essay, demonstrating the sometimes conflicting and ultimately unknowable chemistry that is involved in poetic creation. The creative act for Wang Changling, and for every poet who has ever picked up a pen and stared at a blank piece of paper, the creative act is and always will be, in this model, a mystery.